Hi, good evening, everyone. How are you? It's Megan from Hillcrest joining you for story time. I'm going to be reading two different books today. Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss, and then yet another story from the Read to Me Mommy Treasury. We're going to be reading Puss in Boots. If you have these books at home, go run and grab them and we can read them together. If not, that's okay too. We'll go ahead and get started. We're going to read Oh, the Places You'll Go. All right. Congratulations. Today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You're on your own. You know what you know. And you are the guy who'll decide where to go. You'll look up and down streets, look 'em over with care. And some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so good street. You may not find any you'll want to go down, and in that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's opener there in the wide open air. Out there, things can happen, and frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. When things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew, just go right along. You'll start happening too. Oh, the places you'll go. You'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true that bang ups and hang ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in the prickly perch, and your gang will fly on. You'll be left in a lurch. You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and the chances are then you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're darked. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare stay out? Do you dare go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if you go in, should you turn left or right? Or right and three quarters? Or maybe not quite? Or go back around and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you will find, for a mind maker upper to make up his mind. You can get so confused, you'll start in to race down long wiggled roads at a break-necking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, toward a most useless place, the waiting place. For people just waiting, waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or a no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for a Friday night, or waiting, perhaps, for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. No, that's not for you. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing. With banner flip flapping, once more you'll ride high, ready for anything under the sky. Ready because you're that kind of guy. Oh, the places you'll go. There is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. And the magical things you can do with that ball will make you the winningest winner of all. Fame! You'll be famous as famous can be, with the whole wide world watching you win on TV. Except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too, games you can't win, 'cause you'll play against you. All alone. Whether you like it or not, alone will be something you'll be quite a lot. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll meet things that scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much you won't want to go on. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. On you will go, though your enemies prowl. On you will go, through the hacking cracks howl. Onward up many a frightening creek, though your arms may get sore and your sneakers may leak. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So sure, so be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. And just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will succeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. So, be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Ali Van Allen O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way. The end. Have you read Oh, the Places You'll Go? Do you like Dr. Seuss? I love Dr. Seuss. That's one of my favorites. Now, let's read a story about Puss in Boots. Once upon a time, there was a poor old miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left his mill to the eldest son. He left his donkey to his middle son, and he left his cat to his youngest son, who was called Jack. It was a very fine cat, with handsome silver whiskers and beautiful emerald eyes, but Jack was so poor that he could barely afford to feed himself, let alone the poor creature as well. "What am I going to do with you?" Jack asked the cat. "My brothers will be able to make a living with their mill and donkey, while you and I will probably starve." He tickled the purring cat's soft belly and shook his head sadly. Well, Jack might have spoken to the cat, but he certainly didn't expect it to answer, so you can imagine his surprise when the cat said, "Don't worry about a thing. Just give me a pair of boots, a hat, and a sack, and you'll soon discover that I'm worth much more than that silly old mill or a stupid donkey." Oh my goodness, that is a sassy cat. Jack quickly saw that this was no ordinary cat, so he took his last coins and bought a hat and a pair of fine boots. Then he went to his brother's mill to fetch a sack. Jack presented both to the cat, who was delighted. He pulled on the boots and strutted up and down in front of his master. The cat looked so funny that Jack laughed and laughed until his sides hurt. Then and there, he decided to call him Puss in Boots. The following morning, Puss in Boots rose early and went hunting in the forest. Almost immediately, he caught a fine rabbit and set off to the king's palace with it in his sack. At the palace, he presented it to the king and said, "This is a gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas," a name that he had at that very moment conjured up in his head. The king was delighted with the gift and very amused to see a cat wearing such fine boots. He couldn't wait to see who owned such a fine pet. "Perhaps I could call on your master and thank him myself," he suggested. Well, you might be surprised to learn that Puss in Boots quickly gave the king directions to his master's castle. The king promised he would call the next day and bring his beautiful daughter, Melissa, with him. The next morning, Puss in Boots took Jack to a lake on the very road he had told the king his master's castle was on. The cunning puss had told his master that if he bathed in the water, it would bring him good luck. As soon as Jack dived into the water, Puss in Boots hid his clothes and ran to meet the king. "Help! Help!" cried Puss as soon as he spotted the king's carriage. "Robbers have stolen my master's clothes." Without a moment's hesitation, the king told his servants to fetch the fair clothes that he always carried in the back of his carriage and to give them to Jack. Jack got dressed in a suit of the finest cloth. He looked like such a fine gentleman that the king happily invited Jack to join him and Princess Melissa in their royal carriage. Jack looked so handsome that the princess blushed prettily and fell in love with him on the spot. Look at Jack in his fine clothes. Once they were all safely in the carriage, Puss in Boots got down on all fours and raced ahead. He came to a field where some men were working. "Good men," Puss began, "when the king comes passing by in his carriage, you must tell him that the fields in which you work belong to the Marquis of Carabas. If you don't, it'll be off with your heads." Sure enough, when the king passed the field of workers, he stopped and asked who owned the land. "Why, the Marquis of Carabas, your majesty," they all replied, for no one wanted to see if the cat's threats would come true. The king was secretly impressed, even though poor Jack looked a little confused. Puss in Boots, realizing his plan was working, did the same thing again. All the farmers and tradesmen the king met said, "Everything around here belongs to the Marquis of Carabas." The king looked at Jack sitting beside his blushing daughter and smiled. He's so handsome and rich. He'd make a fine husband for my daughter, he thought to himself. As it happened, the fields and the lands really belonged to a fierce giant who lived in the castle at the end of the road. Puss in Boots hurried to the castle and knocked on the door. "Who goes there?" roared the big, fierce giant. "Just me," replied Puss in Boots. "I've traveled from far away because I've heard that you are a wonderful magician. I have heard that you can change yourself into any animal you want." Look at that giant. "True," said the giant, who was very vain and a bit of a show-off. Then he turned himself into a huge lion. "That's very impressive," said Puss in Boots from where he was hiding behind a cupboard. "But I bet a fellow like you couldn't turn yourself into something small, such as a teeny tiny mouse." "Easy peasy," boasted the giant, immediately turning himself into a little brown mouse. In a flash, the cunning puss pounced on the mouse and gobbled him up. Oh my goodness. Just then, the king's carriage arrived at the castle. Puss in Boots raced out to welcome him. "Welcome to the Marquis of Carabas's humble home," said the cat with a sweeping bow. "You mean to say all of this is yours?" said the king, turning to Jack. At first, Jack looked confused, but when Puss in Boots winked at him, he decided to hold his tongue. He held out his hand and led Princess Melissa into the castle. The king was so impressed that when Jack, or the Marquis of Carabas, as he was now called, asked him for his daughter's hand in marriage, he quickly agreed. Indeed, he heartily congratulated himself on finding such a fine son-in-law. And from that day forth, the Marquis of Carabas, the princess, and of course, Puss in Boots, lived happily ever after. The end. What a clever cat. Well, thank you for joining me tonight for story time, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night.